What's going on, everyone? My name is Daniel, and I love celebrating all kinds of movies. And today I'm going to talk to you about 5 classic films for you to watch after Avatar: The Way of Water. Avatar: The Way of Water just came out this weekend, 13 years after the release of the original film. And I just got back from seeing it, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a visually dazzling movie, to use the weakest language possible for that, with very emotional moments, great characters, and incredible action scenes. And the first point of comparison I'm going to use to connect it to films of the past and make recommendations is water. Avatar: The Way of Water is a water blockbuster. Yes, this is a genre I'm inventing right now. No, but seriously, water movies became very popular in the 50s and 60s. Even the James Bond franchise got in on the action with Thunderball. There was even an Elvis movie that did as well. But I'm going to talk to you about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea from 1954. So the plot of this movie is that in the 1800s, rumors of a sea monster attacking ships in the Pacific Ocean have created fear among sailors, which is disrupting shipping lanes. So the US government sends out a crew to conduct an exposition to prove or disprove the monster's existence, and they discover that instead of a monster, it is a submarine called the Nautilus, captained by the mad Captain Nemo. So this movie starred Kirk Douglas and James Mason. Kirk Douglas is a sailor who ends up on the Nautilus sort of as a prisoner, but also as a crew member on the ship, and he's a bit of a flat character. His performance feels like he knows he's in a movie for kids, because this is a Disney movie, like Avatar: The Way of Water, technically. But James Mason plays Captain Nemo, and James Mason is on the other end of the spectrum. He feels like he is going for the Oscar. It's an incredible, intense performance that I loved watching. He's this intense maverick of a character who doesn't play by society's rules, which is very fun to watch. Like Avatar: The Way of Water, there's a lot of underwater scenes, which can be boring, but I thought this movie did it very well. A lot of very nature documentary-like shots of undersea life, which is very connected to the beautiful shots that we see in Avatar: The Way of Water, except less documentary-like because none of those sea animals exist. Now, admittedly, this is my least favorite movie of all the movies I'm going to talk to you about today, so it's all uphill from here. While the first hour can feel a little bit slow, the second hour gets much more intense, a lot of more great stuff with James Mason, and there's a great set piece involving a giant squid attacking the Nautilus, which is really cool. Like I said, my least favorite movie on the list, but if you are interested in the history of action-adventure blockbuster cinema, or water blockbusters, I highly recommend this one. It's kind of a must-see. So one of my favorite things about these Avatar movies is that they are jungle movies, and they come from a long lineage of jungle cinema, going all the way back to the 1920s. I'm not going to go quite that far back for this next recommendation, but pretty close. This is Tarzan and His Mate from 1934. Not only one of my favorite jungle movies out there, it is probably the earliest example of an action-adventure movie that I love. So this movie is about Tarzan and Jane living in the jungle, and Jane's ex-boyfriend shows up and wants Tarzan to lead him to a graveyard of elephants so he can steal the ivory. But Tarzan might not be okay with this kind of grave robbing, and the ex-boyfriend has brought along a friend who has even more sinister intentions. Something that I find so fascinating about the history of movies is the fact that Tarzan is actually one of the biggest film franchises in history. And almost nobody knows that or talks about it these days. At least that's how it feels. And from all the ones I've seen so far, this one is definitely my favorite. My favorite thing about the movie is just the dynamic between Tarzan and Jane. This movie is a sequel to Tarzan the Ape Man. And when we open up the movie, Tarzan and Jane have been living together for a while out in the jungle. And just their portrait of unconventional domestic bliss is really, really fun to watch. This movie's biggest claim to fame is that it had unusually high sexual content for the 1930s. It has nudity in underwater scenes of them swimming. Of course, they are living as man and wife when they're not technically married because they're just living in the jungle. All this was a bit controversial at the time, which I know sounds quaint by today's standards, but it has a lot more to offer outside of those things. It's a very fun action movie with some big set pieces, tons of animal stuff. I mean, I understand why we don't use real animals for this kind of thing now, but as a historical relic, it's just fascinating. There are scenes of Tarzan wrestling lions. 2 scenes of Tarzan wrestling lions. It actually has a surprising amount of violence, including a big action finale of Tarzan versus a rival tribe and a bunch of animals. Very cool stuff. And it also has a not so subtle message about animal rights and English desecration of sacred spaces in foreign countries. And I really appreciated that because it gave Tarzan a point of view, and that made him a bit of a deeper character than just the me Tarzan thing that he usually is. But probably my favorite thing about Avatar: The Way of Water is not just that it's a jungle movie, but it is a family in the jungle movie. And I love the family stuff in this movie. It stood in contrast to the superhero genre right now to me, because I love superhero movies. But one thing that does kind of bother me about where the movies are right now is these franchises go on for so long and the characters are never really allowed to move forward in life very much. So few of them are allowed the chance to get married or have long-term relationships at least and have children and become patriarchs and matriarchs of families. And when the characters want that, like say Wanda, it gets taken away from them and they become villains, like in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And I find that sad, and when they're characters that I love, I want them to find happiness. And Avatar: The Way of Water is in stark contrast to that because the characters of Jake, Sully, and Neytiri have moved forward so much in the 13 years between the first movie and the next movie. They have had 4 children. They are the patriarch and the matriarch of a family. They're leading this family. And I just loved all the family stuff in this film. I found it very sweet, very emotional, but also it's just great to see characters move forward in franchises and not be stuck in the same place. And when I'm thinking about a movie from the past about a family staying together and going on a jungle adventure, it's gotta be Swiss Family Robinson from 1960. Another Disney movie and probably one of the most popular Disney movies of the 1960s. But if you haven't seen it, it's about a Swiss family, so that's why they call it that. Sailing to New Guinea and are shipwrecked and deserted on a tropical island. Faced with this nightmare situation, they make the best of it by exploring the island and its wildlife and building a home for themselves. Now, if you talk to anybody who has seen this movie, the first thing they're going to mention is the treehouse. Probably the coolest thing about this movie is that the family builds this incredible treehouse home for them to live in. And when I said they make the best of this situation of being shipwrecked, they truly do. They make this incredible house. This set that they've created for the movie is beautiful, and it's just such wish fulfillment. You think if I were deserted on a tropical island, I would never be able to do that, but it's exactly what I would want to do. And the family dynamic between them is really fun. The dad is awesome. He's such an awesome dad. Dad goes all the way. And it's just nice to see such a functional family. Dysfunctional family, there could be some great drama in that. There's so much great media about dysfunctional families. But this is a family that works very well together, and they're really great to spend time with through this movie. And the film just has so many thrills. It's got tons of jungle animals like zebras and tigers. It's got pirates. They have this big battle with pirates. Actually, the movie was very influential on George Lucas because there's a scene of 2 of the brothers fighting an anaconda in the swamp, which turned out to be very influential on the garbage chute scene in Star Wars. And the battle against the pirates at the end was again influential on the Battle of Endor, rather, we should call it, in Return of the Jedi. I grew up on this movie, so I'll definitely claim some nostalgia, but I really think it would be a great movie to check out. And of all these movies, it's my personal favorite as a pairing recommendation with Avatar: The Way of Water. I think they would go together really well. Before I go into the next 2, let me know if you have any pairing recommendations with Avatar: The Way of Water. What I mean by that is movies that would be a good double feature with it, especially if they're old movies. I would love to know, and I would especially love to know if I haven't seen those movies, because I would love to take those recommendations. Also, did you see Avatar: The Way of Water? What did you think about it? Let me know down below. Next up, something that's so appealing about these Avatar movies are the creatures. There's so many wild and scary creatures. Some look like dinosaurs, some look like dragons, some look like whales, like in Avatar: The Way of Water. So next up, I'm going to talk about a giant creature movie, which is The Valley of Gwangi from 1969. I have one phrase to sell you on this movie: Cowboys versus dinosaurs. So the story of this movie is a rodeo comes into the possession of a tiny miniature horse and believes it is sure to be the attraction they need to save their business. But they find out it's actually an extinct prehistoric creature and it came from a forbidden valley. So they launch an expedition into it to find more ancient creatures. And what do they find? That's right, dinosaurs. This is a Ray Harryhausen film. He was a guy who made incredible stop motion animated creatures all through the 50s and the 60s primarily. While it's true this looks dated today, I just love how impressive it is of how they brought these creatures to life practically through the use of meticulous stop motion. It's so much work and it has such a charm today. I love a lot of Ray Harryhausen films like The Clash of the Titans and probably especially his Sinbad movies, and also The Valley of Gwangi. This is a really fun movie with some great cowboys versus dinosaurs action. I really like the characters. They're fun to spend time with through the movie, and it's just great to see dinosaurs not in the Jurassic Park franchise. A lot of fun with that franchise. You know, it has its ups and downs, but I'm overall a fan. But I wish there were more dinosaur movies, and this is an example of one from the late 1960s. And for my fifth and final recommendation, the category I'm using is the Dances with Wolves comparison. If you have heard anybody on the internet talk about Avatar, you've probably heard, it's just Dances with Wolves. It's derivative of that Kevin Costner movie. And while I get it, the thing is that suggests that Dances with Wolves is some incredibly original film and Avatar is then unoriginal. And Avatar and Dances with Wolves come from a long line of westerns that use this kind of narrative. And for the movie I am recommending for this category is Broken Arrow from 1950. No, not the John Woo film, although if you haven't seen it, run, don't walk to see John Woo's Broken Arrow. But this is Broken Arrow with Jimmy Stewart and Jeff Chandler. It's a fantastic Western. It's about Jimmy Stewart as a man who has an actual interaction with an Apache man, and he ends up against the wishes of all of the white people that he lives with in an Old West town. He starts learning the Apache ways, learning their language, and trying to negotiate peace between the two people. Along the way, he becomes very close friends with the Apache chief Cochise, played excellently by Jeff Chandler, and falls in love with one of the women of the tribe. So this movie is actually historically significant because it's one of the first post-World War II Westerns to portray Native Americans sympathetically. And you might think that a 1950s Western might not have an incredibly explicit anti-racism message, but this movie absolutely does, and I think it works, and I think it's pretty powerful. And Jimmy Stewart is, of course, incredible in the movie. I love this relationship that builds between his character and the chief Cochise. It's by far the best thing about the movie. My biggest criticism with the movie is that his romance with one of the women in the tribe doesn't work at all because there is a massive age gap between him and the actress playing the woman. Way bigger age gap than I'm used to seeing in like any movie ever made. And it doesn't work. And the romance feels very melodramatic, which isn't helped because there isn't chemistry between these two actors. So that part of the movie doesn't so much work. But the relationship between him and Cochise and some of the action in the movie and just the intensity that brews while he's trying to negotiate peace and having so much difficulty with it, it's a fantastic Western, and despite that one aspect I don't like, I really can't recommend it enough. So that's my 5 recommendations for classic films to watch after Avatar: The Way of Water, which once again is a movie that I absolutely loved. I loved seeing it in 3D, but I'm excited to watch it on 4K Blu-ray at home and just be able to notice those smaller details, right? Because the movie was just so huge. I want to hone in and just really appreciate that story and the smaller details of that image. So never bet against James Cameron. He always knows what he's doing. I loved that movie, and I'm a big fan of these movies that we're talking about as well. Give us a subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and a thumbs up would definitely be appreciated. With all that being said, I will be talking about more kinds of movies next time. So I'll see you then.